Well, well, well. Big things have unfolded in the world. That orange devil, that bad, bad man, won the election in spite of the law being turned against him, many aspects of popular progressive culture being wielded to try to defeat him. In spite of many names and a whole lot of shame, not only did he win for his supporters, but he won in strikingly, almost historically impressive fashion. Some might say a stunning victory. And I think on the surface, we all know that the trajectory, the movements of the politics in the United States and the way that that country wields power has an effect on the entire world, particularly the Western world, definitely Canada, where I live. But it's something deeper that's happening. A shift away from a type of energy that's been growing and blooming into the world for good and also in challenging ways. I've spoken about Trump derangement syndrome in the past, which has been more intense than ever, understandably, leading up to the election. So far this year, it's been a strange election. The world is so different than it's ever been. The election kind of crept up, and then it just happened. I already tried to record a video on this subject yesterday. I'm going to try to make this a little more concise and talk about this big turning point that's unfolding. It's the 7th today, so it's been a couple days since Trump took the election. It's sinking in for many people. Many people are overjoyed. Many people are scared and crushed. The amount of liberal tears, I guess, is the derogatory way that some might put it, but the amount of democratically or Democrat-aligned people that are screaming and crying and pouring out all this negative emotion, in many cases in a very performative way on social media, is almost overwhelming. And it gives a lot of Trump supporting and more conservative content creators a whole bunch of material to use for their content. There's such disconnection from the reality of what this will most likely mean for a lot of people. The amount of fear as though all of their rights would be taken away, as though they won't be able to be who they are anymore, or they're going to get put in camps or put in jail or hunted down or beat up or something like that. Conflict will happen between people in relationships, hopefully to a lesser degree, as it always has. Violence will happen on the street in ideally rare cases, but it's not going to mark some big turn where liberal-minded people are going to get swept away, are going to start to get cancelled themselves. Maybe deep down, there's a little bit of even unconscious recognition of how unfair the more left-leaning culture that was in power, that was very mainstream for a number of years, has become. All the various dishonorable tactics used to try to quiet, push aside, shame, and get to leave a situation or not participate. All these tactics, all this sick feminine energy that has been erupting, that has been flowing through Western culture for a number of years now. Only in the last year or two has alternative culture that ultimately became this groundswell that not only brought the previous Trump-supporting base and culture into a powerful position, but also drew new supporters that previously would have been Democrats, that previously might have been on the more left-leaning side, brought them into the fold. There was a surprising, maybe not record-breaking, I'm not sure, but very impressive turnout of many ethnicities that came out to vote. Genders, sexual orientations, again, people that once might have considered themselves Democrats, coming out to vote for Trump, to vote for something different. Maybe people that got sick of identity politics, sick of far-left ideology that is unquestionable, sick of a term I like to use, that I have used in the past, victim bullies, or common term these days, cry bullies. It's the same sort of thing. People that tend to have far left-leaning politics tend to be very righteous about that and use every name in the book, every shame in the book, and the full breadth of weaponized cultural tools to employ cancel culture when someone disagrees with them. Victim bullies. Trump derangement syndrome. All of this sick feminine energy. But something is changing, something is turning. Spaces are getting created to push back, to maintain a different point of view. It's been happening slowly in bits and pieces in our culture and politically for a little while, but now it won't fly to just parrot all those talking points and expect people to shut up and leave when a victim bully starts crying. I definitely, even though I'm Canadian, have encountered a lot of Trump derangement syndrome in my relationships around me, encountered it in my family for a number of years, and even more recently in an encounter group, which is a therapeutic setting for a group of people with a moderator that is not just like a traditional group where you sort of share your feelings, your life, try to process things and just get sort of support for that, but the encounter group is a little more interactive. There's pushback. The idea is to be able to actually challenge people and push on their buttons a little bit to try to get to the heart of the matter, which can be very useful to break through people's resistance and get them to see something they don't want to see, but it can also be destructive. And so for a lot of 2024, I was in this encounter group and almost everybody was far left-leaning. And there was a bias towards people with my complexion, towards people that I'm not a Trump supporter, I'm not a conservative, but I do question things. I think that spiritual, philosophical, and intellectual strength is shown with the ability to look at all sides of things, to try to find common ground within that, to even stand up for those you don't agree with when they're not being treated fairly, when underhanded tactics are being used. And so sometimes I might even argue for a point of view that isn't exactly something that is the most important to me or that I think is even true, but there's many areas of life that come down to a point of view, come down to the path that you walk, and how these issues affect you. And so when I was in this encounter group, Trump derangement syndrome was ever present, even though Trump only came up a few times, and that kind of ire only got expressed explicitly a few times. It was very clear. And just generally, there was a kind of a bias towards that confident masculine energy that will stand on its own and alone, on principle, if necessary, and that won't be moved, that won't just make a compromise to try to fit in with everybody and minimize conflict, that is willing to stand up for something. And I found myself in that position a few times, and I got kind of piled on and kicked around. Now I stood my ground, I pushed back, but I ended up getting, I suppose, ganged up on. And I can deal with a fight when I have to, so I made my way through. But at two of the most, I guess you would say, shaky, vulnerable points in my life, one beginning of the year when I finally got rid of another victim bully, this tenant that cost me thousands and thousands of dollars due to, I guess, their mental health problems inflamed by other victim bullies, like neighbors I have around me that spread gossip about, I don't know, I guess the angry man, the big bad man, you know, a version of that Trump derangement syndrome, that reaction against that masculine energy that tends to manifest in victim bullies. I got rid of this tenant that wouldn't leave, that I treated civilly and fairly and just heard me argue with my girlfriend and decided that I was a bad person. And finally I got rid of her, worked very hard, and in this encounter group I got piled on. And somewhat indirectly, this person that had no moral ground to stand on, that had cost me thousands of dollars just because of their own mental health issues that were unresolved, they kind of got defended. And I got one far left liberal talking point slammed into me after the other. Now I stood my ground. Eventually a bunch of people left because they couldn't handle the pushback, even though I was the only one speaking from my position, and obviously in a vulnerable point after quite a bit of stress and quite a bit of work to try to get rid of this person for many months. But, you know, I stood my ground and I stuck around, even though the person that kind of led the charge, who was very much in that role of victim bully, very much passionate about these left-leaning talking points. They left, I stuck around, and I tried to stick it out. Months later, I got into a relationship. It was short, it was hot and heavy, and it ended quickly. And again, another point, I was kind of broken down. I was upset, I was stressed out, I was in a vulnerable position. And again, I got piled on. And it was surprising. I suppose that's actually the second time that I guess I got ganged up on, but stood my ground, and the fact that I wouldn't just fold and agree with people upset everybody. That's when this one person who was very passionate about trying to push their political ideology left, because they couldn't handle, I guess, a fight, even though it was self-defense, even though I didn't say anything nasty, even though I didn't scream at them. I had a tone, I stood my ground, and they had to leave, but that was still in the air. There was a bias there in that group that was a microcosm of the larger macrocosm that led to Trump getting elected, and that has, in some cases, empowered and inflamed that part of people that Trump derangement syndrome comes from, that sick feminine energy flows through. And eventually I had to leave the group because it was just really clear that there was this bias. There was no room for a difference of opinion. There was no room for a person born a man, which is a term that I used just speaking about my life, my experiences, and what I was going through, not during anyone else's time to talk. That's not an idea or a term that I really pushed. But again, just speaking about my own experience, it offended some people, and I just had to leave. So it was unfortunate to see the lack of flexibility, to see the lack of awareness of the sick feminine energy in there and the bias towards masculine energy that existed in that group and that exists to a larger degree in many more left-leaning circles of people and culture in general. But I stuck it out as long as I could, and I'm glad I did. I learned a lot, and here we are. Trump is elected. You see, Trump derangement syndrome comes from something that's deeper. There's a shift. There's all this stuff coming to the surface that we have to deal with. And a big part of that is feminine energy stepping into power, coming more into the forefront in the world. And we need that for more cooperation, more unity, more love, more acceptance. That's part of the evolution of humanity at this stage of history. But when that feminine energy grows and blooms, it creates a shadow. And from the shadow of feminine energy comes sick feminine energy. And that's where victim bullies become empowered. That's where exaggeration, false accusation, victimization, outright lying, manipulation, all that comes into play as justified when sick feminine energy takes a hold of people. And that can be women or men. People born a woman or born a man can get possessed by sick feminine energy. The gossip that I still don't really exactly know all the details of and the source of from neighbors surrounding my place that was spread over the years that inflamed this woman in the basement who cost me thousands of dollars and was very nasty. All of that, manifestations of sick feminine energy, inspiring victim bullyhood. Many left-leaning people that are now crying all over social media have been possessed by sick feminine energy, and it's created a kind of mania where people actually think that they're going to get thrown in camps or that they're not going to be able to love who they want to love or identify the way that they want to identify. Yes, there will be some changes, but this is part of the rebalancing. There's been this huge blooming for a number of years from 2015-16 to now of feminine energy stepping into power. And on one hand, that's very good. But again, as this thing erupts, as this thing grows into the world and the light hits it, it creates shadow. That sick feminine energy has flowed hot and heavy. And now there is a kind of masculine energy that I guess Trump and some of the Trump supporters represent that is creating a space to stand within. There is a rebalancing happening. Ultimately, for us to come back to unity, which is what this stage of history is, which is what I think most of us want, really deep down, is to be able to get along, to be able to be prosperous together, to recognize we're more similar than we are different. But there is now, and will continue to be, and I guess the space will grow, a place for masculine energy that will not fold, that will not just go away with name-calling or shaming or canceling from the feminine side of things. There is a space for masculine energy to stand tall and strong and confident in truth, and in time this blooming, powerful feminine energy will rebalance and learn to manage that, learn to accept that. So it's okay. These are growing pains. This is a big turning point. And maybe even some exciting things might happen. Maybe some things might improve in some way. It's definitely time for something different. And this is different. This is definitely different. Liberal leaning people, you'll be all right. You'll adapt. You'll have your catharsis, and it will dissipate. And I think more and more, as that sick feminine energy is challenged, people just won't be so possessed, won't be so gripped by it. And we'll start to be able to see in a little more balanced way. Start to be able to see to the other side of the argument, to the other side of the culture war, the conflict. If you voted for Trump, if you are a Trump supporter, if you are a conservative, if you are on that side of the cultural divide, I would just ask you, please do your best to have compassion for some of these people that are going through this emotional crisis. As performative as it might seem, have some compassion for them. It is scary. Their bubble of delusion is being shattered, and it's going to take a little while. It's going to take some months for it all to sink in and for them to realize that their world is not over. They won't be hunted down. They'll still be able to live, for the most part, the way that they lived. Have some compassion for them. The Trump derangement syndrome will continue, but it doesn't have the same hold and power that it once did. So, like I said, we will heal. This is part of a difficult turning point and growth process. We will find a way back to each other, and good luck with your process. I'll see you again soon.